All right. Good morning. You're obviously seeing me at some of my worst. I mean, I just woke up. My eyes are a little puffy here. Just had my morning coffee. I'm trying to hydrate. I had a run-in with some incredibly hot chili pepper fire peanuts a couple days ago, and that actually caused a blister. So I don't look at my best, but early in the morning I want to get to it because I got a lot of stuff to do today. All right, let's start with some demographics in the martial arts. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious we know the contributions of Asians in the martial arts. I mean, they helped popularize it. Ignoring certain martial sports and martial traditions of the West, like fencing. Fencing's been around in the U.S. for a long time. Boxing, of course, right? But we know that it is the Asian martial arts, starting with judo and progressing to karate, with their organization, their belt structure, and believe it or not, for an Eastern system, Jigoro Kano introduced a lot of logic, and he made things so that they could be taught with both Eastern and Western pedagogical methods, right? And, he also proselytized. It was his mission to spread this to the world, okay? And so the Asian martial arts brought martial arts to the common man. I mean, to be honest with you, even before Jigoro Kano, Jiu-Jitsu, spelled Jiu-Jitsu, in the 1800s, was a mysterious martial art of the Orient, and still is, to be honest with you. I think Japanese Jiu-Jitsu is getting shortchanged by the popularity of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we know what Asians contribute. We should know what Asians contributed to the West, especially America. And of course, white people. Most of the people in America are white, especially back when these arts were coming in. Demographics have shifted a little bit, and we know that being most of the participants, most of the teachers, they have a great contribution. After taking the transmission from the West, they've done a bunch. But let's talk about some other demographics, all right? Let's talk about black people. Black contributions to the martial arts. I'm going to start with one true statement. Some of you may have watched some of my previous videos. I have a bunch of PDFs that I bought off the internet, and to be quite honest with you, they're probably pirated. It was 2 CDs, and they were PDFs of Black Belt magazine issues of the 70s and 80s, all right? And, again, I didn't know that they were pirated when I bought them off of eBay, but yeah, That being said, I have them, and I've been looking at them. And this was in the 70s, early 70s. I don't know if this was 1973 or 74, around that time. It was an interview with Gary Alexander, the late Gary Alexander, who, say what you will about him, was a karate pioneer, was a martial art pioneer, especially in New Jersey. It was a remarkably candid and honest interview with him, okay? Gary Alexander did not shy down from stating his opinion, and despite people thinking political correctness is a modern thing, people have always been under certain pressure to minimize certain topics. So let's get on with it. Gary Alexander talked about his tournament career and his promoter's career. So his tournament career, he says, in a sense, he was lucky. Yes, he was a national karate champion, and he was definitely the champion of New Jersey, but he only competed in 2 tournaments. They happened to be big tournaments in the tri-state area. I think one was in New Jersey, one was in New York City, and there weren't a lot of karate tournaments back then, but they were considered national tournaments. Fighters from the different parts of the United States did travel, and he did defeat all comers under those rules, and I think it was bare knuckle point. So, had he been of equal comparable level of skill, and young competing today, or maybe in what I would call some of the peak years of point fighting competition, late 80s, early 90s, would he have placed nationally? I don't know. So, and then he talked about his career as a promoter. He was promoting tournaments, and he stated that the New York City tournaments were turning into a battleground, particularly between black and white competitors. And I am going to use the term black and white, those of you, anybody who was around at that time, and anybody, who's not born, after 2000 is going to relate to that term. Because all my friends were black. None were African American. That's all I can say. I grew up around blacks. We didn't have any Africans on my street. I'm joking. All right. So he said it turned into a race war and gang wars, and it was bloody, and he got so disgusted with it, and so, it was just too much trouble. He said, I moved my tournaments to New Jersey, and I made a deliberate effort to weed out undesirables. And he said in the interview, and this was not based on race, but it was based on behavior and affiliations with dojos and gangs that perpetuated the race war going on in New York City. And he said, now the distribution of my tournaments is the same, we're talking 70s, early 70s, as it was in New York City. About 50% white, 50% black. And we have great tournaments, we have a good time, no violence, no racist incidents, and good sportsmanship. Which, okay, that's cool. Like, tournaments, so much can go wrong in tournaments. I've competed in one of Gary Alexander's tournaments in about 2001 or so. And it wasn't 50% black, 50% white, but definitely a lot of black competitors, a lot of Latins, some Asians. He had a very diverse group of people competing. The judging was, in my opinion, crap. Okay, he had one judge in particular, a Shorin Ryu guy, a black guy, but his judging and his reffing was crap, in my opinion, absolute crap. And he was definitely an older, experienced martial artist, and he was probably the most negative part of the show. There was some of the judges, when I was doing kata, didn't know what to make of my five ancestor fist form. There were other kung fu competitors there, and then, when it came time to judge, there was a judge there who made sure that I didn't get to judge kata or kumite, but they sure felt, fine taking karate people judging me. So, and despite that, I placed highly in forms. I think I got a second in black belt forms. A second or a third. It's been so long, folks. It's been 23 years, just about. But let's take a look at Gary Alexander's statement. 50% black, 50% white. In New York City, when nobody was screened. In New Jersey, when everybody was screened. That just goes to show you that the black community back then had a very high participation rate in martial arts and in martial arts competition. When you consider that, I don't know what the demographics were back in the 70s. I know right now, I think African Americans make up 16% of the population. If I'm not mistaken, I definitely could be wrong on that, all right? But I know it's not like a quarter of the population. I know it's definitely not a half of the population being black across the U.S., all right? And even in the East Coast, where there is a lot of black people, huge black population, I know it's not 50%, right? So if anything, black people could have been overrepresented in tournament competition, but it was a self-selection, right? And of course we know that, blacks make up a huge proportion of the athletic world. I mean, call it what you will. I mean, are there genetic factors between black and white people that are different? For sure. I mean, are they so incredibly significant as both the racists and the Afrocentrists say? I don't think so. I don't think so. 2 arms, 2 legs, lungs, heart, brain. A freakishly unintelligent person blessed with an amazing physique cannot succeed in the NBA, cannot succeed in the WNBA, cannot succeed in the NFL, cannot succeed at any major professional sport level where so many variables come into play. It takes intelligence to play a game of basketball well with your team, and especially if you're a team captain playing with the team. If you have this racist belief, well, black people are, I've heard this from white martial artists, okay? Martial artists who worked at schools that I worked at say, it's kind of like animals. Animals are born stronger than humans, but, just because a lion or a cheetah or a giraffe can outrun a man or something, it's not like they have better brains. It's not like they're, equal. And I'm like, dude, that's dumb. That's dumb. All right. So yeah, we don't have to talk about all the great African Americans, blacks, I let that term sneak in, over the history of martial arts in the USA that taught this style and that style and accomplished those things. I think I've done a good job of it. I've talked about Preston Carter. I've talked about various competitors. I talked about fighting someone from Vitasana in a good sportsmanship-like match at a tournament in Philly, on and on. And will continue to do so. If you're a good martial artist and I feel like I need to talk about you, I will, regardless of race, sexual orientation, whatever. But just the sheer numbers. Back then in the 70s, if major tournaments run by a major promoter, one of the few promoters at the time on the East Coast, a very densely populated place, both a very densely populated city, New York City, and a densely populated state, New Jersey, says that his tournaments were 50% black. That just lets you know that their participation, their mere presence, shaped and defined martial arts in the United States of America. All right? To an equal degree, or close to it, to that of white people who make up most of the people in this country still, and who still control most of the resources, the money, and have the social connections to affect changes. All right? So I think that's a significant thing that isn't being mentioned. And I have noticed, when I go to tournaments, there's lots of black people. Black people, whether for combination of genetic, cultural, personal, societal pressure, growing up around examples, whatnot, maybe lack of opportunities in other areas and pursuing success in athletics, right, are just huge in American sports, right? And you have to literally be blind to ignore that. So to all the black martial artists out there, especially from older generations that were out there doing their thing through the 70s, 80s, 60s, hell, even 50s and up to the 90s, when tournament competition was bigger, thank you. You obviously kept this art going, put your money and time into it, influenced it for good and bad. But there it is. We're standing on something that you had a significant role in building. So, kudos.